Greetings in the name of Ngayame and Yah Santua. All that is good and great, all that is blessed and beautiful, all that is creative and conscious, and all that is positive and possible. May the warm sun rays greet you each and every morning, and may your day always be full of joy. Hotep, I'm Adisa Olabayo Bankole, and your host to Mind Vibes, Thoughts from a Curious Mind, a bi-monthly podcast series exploring and examining social phenomena then and now. Now, what I want to deal with is, something that centers around family, but also something that centers around people getting older. And so in this one episode, I'm going to deal with pride and stubbornness, vanity, self-infliction. But before we go there, hit that like button, share, subscribe, leave a comment. Okay, again, pride and stubbornness, vanity, self-infliction. Quote unquote, in youth, we run into difficulties. In old age, difficulties run into us. Josh Billings. There are times when pride can be a positive trait. It often demonstrates one's ability to achieve certain things and have the admiration for it. It often will instill an emotional way one feels about one's culture, country, community, or family, or even self. However, when stubbornness takes hold and pride turns to vanity, then they tend to diminish one's ability to see objectively their own reality. Ageism is usually the culprit when it comes to stubbornness, simply because one does not wish to see their reality. The understanding that one's faculties, both mental and physical, are no longer functioning as they once were. For example, a brother who was athletic in his youth, is now up in age, has had hip surgeries. He was trying to convince his elder brother, who is partially blind now, to get a cane that the blind uses, so he would have more mobility. Yet, this brother's pride of being seen with a cane by others, to him, is quote-unquote unsightly. I guess it would make him seem and or feel quote-unquote weak. But with this type of stubbornness or vanity, it tends to be burdensome for other people, regardless if they are in their youth or a bit older. It tends to grind everything to a halt. But more than that, then other people have to deal with either the guilt or the pity, even though those may be the things that this handicapped elderly doesn't want, yet they oftentimes will insist that they don't want to be a burden. Some time ago, when these two lovebirds were hitting their age of retirement, they moved in the southern part of America. Now, on the face of it, it wasn't a bad move. However, they moved in a space that was isolated and desolate. Even though it has now been built up over the years, it is still somewhat isolated. It is still somewhat desolated. And you need to have transportation, and there is no public transportation in this space or in this place. And when they moved, they still had the ability to drive. Right? Now they don't. So they can't go here and there and through and everywhere. As they age, however, Their faculty, as all of whom live long, will succumb to, as we see with many of our politicians in Congress, starting to give way. This elder's partner suffered a rehabilitating condition that to some degree slowed the mobility even more. However, at the same time, the other elder was dealing with their handicap. So in other words, they were getting up in age, right? And both of them were beginning to already show signs that their faculties were giving way. And there was a condition that happened to one of the partners that made the situation worse. Right? At the same time, the other partner, their situation was also getting worse. The hearing was going, the sight was going. So neither of them now can drive. And so you're living in a place that they can't get around, and so you have to now depend on relatives and or friends, and that can be a source of some real sticky situation. It just is. Yet neither one thought of relocating to a more accommodating community, one which would give them a security and freedom. You know, Again, pride and stubbornness on both of their parts, not wanting to admit they no longer have their full faculties without someone else's assistance, which again becomes even more of a burden. They try to run from being a burden, but their vanity won't let them. You know, there's like, I don't want to be a burden, but you are still not dealing with the real issue of your situation, so you become somewhat burdensome, even though you don't want to be, but your stubbornness and your pride is stopping you from seeing that, yeah, okay, this is what's happened. I am often reminded by certain family members that A, it is the African tradition that the youth should now shoulder the burden with time and energy for their elderly parents. However, I am not quite of that sentiment in its entirety. Though I am a great component of many African traditions, there are many that I take issue with, simply because I don't believe becoming a 24-hour caretaker for elderly people, especially if you are not of the mindset or have the fortitude to do it. I don't feel the youth should be compelled to take on this responsibility, particularly when the elderly has shown no signs of them recognizing their own inabilities and at least stop being so wedded to their stubbornness to meet the youth halfway. You know, so I mean, you're here, you're losing your sight, but you don't want to take and get a cane or see an eye dog. You know, you have a debilitating illness, right? But yet you haven't really done anything to really strengthen yourself, so that you could at least be able to move and have more mobility. You know, so you haven't, but now your child now, it's kind of getting the brunt of it, because you as the elder person, you know, you don't see your reality, you know. Yet at the same time, you're still dealing with, well, I don't want to be a burden, right? And B, I'm also told that many of these handicapped elderlies are comfortable where they are at in their homes, around their neighborhood. Yet, it may be the very space that is not so convenient for them. Again, it places responsibilities on their children or the youth. Now, I certainly don't deal with the concept that I saw on an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation that promulgates that one should not be allowed to grow past the age of 60. I think that's foolish because there are 60, 70, 80-year old. I go to the gym and I see people who are 72, 73, people who are 80, old women who, they get in the Zumba class and they be kicking it, man. They be, one, two, three, and they be going at it, man. And I see some elderlies whose physicality, the little slunch over and stuff, but they're still going in there lifting the weights, So, and some of their minds are sharp, Malefic Sante, one of our great philosophers and our great scholars, Maulana Karenga, they're up there. They're up there in their 80s, and they're still sharp, President Joe Biden is 80, right? And he seems just as sharp, right? Right? But that doesn't mean that when you don't have those faculties, that you should deal with this kind of stubbornness and this pride, right? I also don't go into the with the sci-fi film Logan's Run that advocates that death should occur at age 30. Now there was another reason for that, in that film. But I'm not a great proponent, I'm sorry, that you shove elderly people off to the side. No, you don't. Because elderly people are functioning. They are people. They are human beings, and they are meant to be treated as such. At the same time, however, they must also recognize that the youth have their life. They also have a life to live. And many times these elderly, their children are married. They have children. However, I am dealing with the attachment to pride and stubbornness that often leads to vanity, which tends to cloud one's reality or perspective. Nor should the youth be made to accept this as a prerequisite of life by placing a guilt trip on them either implicitly or explicitly. A symbiosis should be a major key for both elderly and youth that is not dictated by pride or stubbornness, but by compromise and compassion. The acceptance of the elderly that they must accept their reality and not what vanity dictates, and the youth must remind themselves that they will be in that space if they live long enough. Yet, they must live their lives as well. No parent, and this is just my opinion, right? No parent should ever believe that they should inflict responsibility for them onto their children or the youth in general, and on the youth, right? And I mean, again, just because you birthed us and you fed us and you clothed us and you wiped our behinds and stuff, right? That should not be a down payment on us having to deal with you and your elderly. And again, I'm not being insensitive here, just simply because that's what it is. We do it because we love you. We do it because you have been responsible to us and you did birth us, right? but it should not be a prerequisite. You know, and also again, you as the elderly should meet the youth halfway. Right? The youth in general should not shirk their responsibilities when the elders, with the elders, accept their own reality. You know, so that means once the elderly accepts the reality of their situation and meets the youth halfway, then yes, there can be a symbiosis. There can be this understanding, and the bridge can now be crossed effortlessly. Right? Now, of course, when certain diseases like dementia or Alzheimer's, strokes, or other conditions that have completely incapacitated that elder to a degree that their recovery is diminished, then that will be a different story. And here the question will be how much we should expect to be burdened with at the behest of our own health and well-being. All right? Yeah, when you getting Alzheimer's and my mother had started getting dementia, you know, but then that's another story, dealing with my family. But she started getting dementia, you know, and uh, you know, at and at that point, people were saying, well, she needs to be in the house, so she's familiar with it, because of certain things that happen once you go down that road, you know, and it's a horrible things as Picard said on Star Trek: The Next Generation. It's a horrible thing to see your father, that one that you looked up to, that his faculties, his mind began to go, you know. So in that sense, that's a whole different situation, right? But what I'm talking about here is just the pure, you know, um, male stubbornness, you know. And it's like, no, sometimes you have got to recognize your reality, and you have to have an understanding of your children's reality, right? And if you can again, meet halfway, to say, okay, I'm going blind. I need this stick, you know. I had the stroke, but I need to sit down there and do X, Y, and Z. I'm getting, I sense that I'm getting Alzheimer's, so there are things that I need to do, right? And if you're in a place where you're not going to be able to get around, then those are times that you have to take the step to do that. Now, again, I'm also talking about myself and my queen. I hope I don't ever, because right now, you know, I'm in a situation, but I don't see well, so I don't drive. Right? But I hope that I never get into that space where I have to be totally dependent on and stuff, because because sometimes there are youth that like myself, that they're blind when they're born, or they had polio when they were born, and so sometimes they don't have the faculties that are needed, and some are on the autism spectrum, so they are in need of help, right? But here, this is not the case of uh, birth defections or accidental handicaps or war-related situations. This is just a person grown older, but not recognizing that there are certain things that they need to do in order to mitigate being a burden on the youth or their child. And that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying, yeah, I'm not saying all that. I'm just saying that there needs to be some recognition that the stubbornness and the pride can lead to vanity, and that in and of itself can lead to a deteriorating situation which you can easily avoid. So again, this is the Digital Biofancoli saying, Madasi P for listening, and may we all strive to bend the arc of justice towards humanity and believe that love and peace can be achieved. Madasi P.